Okay, so let's get to our stuff. Today I'm changing, on Shabbats, I'm probably not going to be doing the in-depth Tehillim times anymore because we have teaching going on in the morning, and I don't want you guys to just, like veg out, right? So I'm probably going to instead focus my efforts putting them on a separate playlist or maybe a separate channel out on YouTube for those of you who are interested in following the in-depth Ugaritic, Phoenician, getting deep in the Psalms, what they really say. Okay? And so that doesn't mean I'm not going to read a Psalm. So today, I'll decide if I'm going to translate or not. I just want to read through it because for me, reading a Psalm out loud, it really sets the tone. It's often for my benefit, even more than for yours, right? So that I feel closer to Hashem. I feel like it's easier for me to hear from His Ruach after I read a Psalm out loud. That's the power of the Tehillim in Hebrew. Huh. Okay. It's some animation. so our Torah portion is Toldot, if you've seen Toldot, which means something like generations. In the Levitical, in the priestly code, it can mean inscriptions, right? Like people that are signed up for the army. It can mean like genealogy lists, this sort of stuff. But for our purposes in this Torah portion, something like generations, right? Because we see how the generations will continue, not through the wicked Esau, but instead through the righteous Yaakov Avinu. This week's parasha, if you've had your head in the sand, is Breshit, that's Genesis chapter 25, verse 19, through chapter 28, verse 9. And the Haftarah, which we won't get into today for time, is this here. And thank you for being on time, those of you who are on time. I'm trying to start at 4:30 sharp as long as we have a minyan. So I waited till we had a minyan. And then I'm trying to slice the time back a little bit because I don't, we have other teachers, right? We have stuff going on. So I don't want to, make this, 2.5 hours. So you guys in the morning when you're doing other study thinking, oh, we got this one also in the afternoon. We want it to remain a joy, a delight, a little bit light. And so I'm aiming towards an hour, 45 minutes like that. So we'll see. All right, so Psalm 36, I'm just going to read through this aloud, and we'll just see. Don't worry, we're not going to do the 1 hour long discussion. Lamatzech la'eved Adonai leDavid, ne'um pesha'ah l'rasha b'keref libi, ein pachad Elohim leneged einaiv, ki hechelik elav b'einaiv, limsor avono lisno, divrei fiv aven umirma, chadal lehiskil, להיטיב אבן יחשוב על משכבו, יתייצב על דרך לא טוב, רע לא ימאס. אדוני בהשמיים חסדך, אמונתך עד שחקים, צדקתך כהררי עיר, משפטך תהום רבה. אדם ובהמה תושיע אדוני. מה יקר חסדך אלוהים, ובני אדם בצל כנפיך יחיה ציון. ירוויון מדשן ביתך, ונחל אדניך תשכם, כי עמך מקור חיים, באורך נראה אור. משוך חסדך ליודעך, וצדקתך לישחי לב, אל תבואני רגל, גאווה ויד רשעים אל תנידני. שם נפלו פועלי אבן, דוחו ולא יכלו קום. Did you feel it? Can you feel it? Even if you don't know what you're reading, guys, start reading the Psalms out loud. It really will change you. I promise it will change you. You read it out loud in the Hebrew. I can't make any promises for translated text, but you read in the Hebrew, it will change your whole atmosphere, the whole ambiance, everything around you. Even if you feel like, oh, I don't want to do this right now, if you just do it, it will change. It will cause the introspection, the light to shine on you. So, okay, so I promised to get through quicker today, so let's go ahead and let's get to the Torah. Generations. So let's start here with Breshit, chapter 25, verse 19 through 22a. Ve'ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. Now these are the generations, right? Or whatever you want to consider that Toldot. It comes from Yalad, to birth, right? So you can, oftentimes in Hebrew, a yud becomes a w, the old vav. So that's what's happening there. These are the generations. These are the families. These are the genealogy of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. Avraham holid et Yitzchak. So Avraham holid. This is from Yalad. It's kind of weird. It's like caused to give birth, right? So sired is how I like to translate that. He sired Yitzchak. The first half of this verse is already labeled Yitzchak as the son of Avraham. It's interesting, right? The son of Avraham. Look here. Yitzchak ben Avraham. For the Hebrew students, they know that this is a construct chain. And so that the first word depends on the last word, on whether it's the or not. Since the last word is definite, we have to say the son, not a son. A son of Avraham would be different grammatically. In the dikduk, it would be ben le Avraham. We'd say le, a son of Avraham. But this is the son. Yitzhak gets the full title as the son in a similar way to what we saw happening with, we saw what happened because Yishmael was undeserving, right? He was not only with what happened with Hagar, his mother, but from the midrashes that we stepped through. Remember when the fire was on the mountain and the Akedah, and they're going to the mountain, and Eliezer and Yishmael are also with them. Those are the Na'arav, his two lads that the Torah talks about. And Avraham asks them, what do you see? He asks them each, what do you see? And they looked to the mountain, to Mount Moriah, the mountain range in the distance. They saw nothing special. But when he asked Yitzchak Beno, he asked him, what do you see? He said, I see the kavod Elokim, the glory of God coming down on this mountain, right? It looks like a bright, brilliant fire. And that's when Avraham Avinu realized that, for sure, Yitzchak was the one who was worthy to be a sacrifice. He was the one who was really willing and ready to be a korban. And so that's why he was also able to speak with faith. When he told the two lads later, he said, Nashuva, we will return to you, right? Confidently. He was filled with the betachon, like we've been talking about, the confidence, because of his lasting emunah, that his gas tank was filled with betachon, so that he knew, Nashuva, one way or the other, he knew that God is not an evil God delighting to hurt his servants. And he wouldn't have given him this child in his old age just to slay the child and not bring him back from the dead. And so some of Chazal, they actually say that Avraham believed that God would actually, that he was going to have to kill him, right? That Avraham was going to have to slay his own son, that this was the test, but that God himself would then resurrect Yitzhak from the dead. What a beautiful type, what a beautiful archetype of the relationship with our Father in heaven and Yeshua HaMashiach, what would happen. So this now is the fruit of that God, although at the time he called him Et Bincha Yechidecha Asher Ahavta, your son who you love, the only one. In this case, the text is saying, referring to Yitzchak, our ancestor, as Ben Avraham, the son of Avraham. In a way, it's as if Yishmael had already been disinherited fully. Verse 20. Vayihi Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto et Rivka vat Betuel haramihi mi padan aram. So it came to pass that let's look over here. And it was, he came to pass, and it was that Yitzchak was son of 40 years, literally. So he's 40 years old. Bekachto, this is lakach. When he took, who did he take? Rivka, the daughter of Betuel, the Aramean, from Padan Aram. Okay? There's still hope for some of you out there. Yitzchak was 40 when he got married. Achot Lavan Acharami, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, lo for himself, the Isha, literally as a woman. And by the way, there's this cute midrash back here that Yitzchak was made to look exactly like Abraham, right? So that nobody could say that it wasn't really his son in his old age, or that he's from Avimelech, or any of this other kind of moti shemra that might happen. Verse 21. Yitzchak l'Adonai l'nochach ishto ki akarahi v'yi'ater lo Adonai v'tahar Rivka ishto. Okay. So then Yitzchak, this is an interesting verb, this atta. So this verb actually comes, it's usually translated something like he pleaded, he entreated. Better, okay, thanks. I'll try to keep it close like this. Thank you for that. But it's interesting the history of this word, because in Hebrew we have many different words for pray, to ask, to plead, right? And why this one here? Why ya'atar, the ayin tav resh? Well, it turns out in Ugaritic there's gatar, which is basically the same root, which means to slaughter, right? To kill. And in classical Arabic, there's atara, I'm probably butchering it, Isa can chime in if you like, which means to ritually sacrifice, like to slaughter for a sacrifice. Yes, good, I'm happy to. And so this kind of gives us a bit of a hint from the cognate languages about this type of prayer, that pre-biblical times, there probably was sacrifice involved. Right? Sacrificing to the God, giving him something to try to get what you want, right? Like trying to make a deal or whatever. But by the time that the Bible was written, this word already just meant something like plead, right? But we see the absolute focus of Yitzchak. Look what he does. He positions himself, the nochach ishto, right? Facing, opposite from and facing his wife, right? So I can't remember which of the sages says, but so that he could keep his focus on her plea, on her pesha, not her pesha, sorry, not the pesha that you're thinking, on her request, right? And so let me look here. See, here's by the way the notes on that if you want to see. There's the qatar, to kill, right, and here's the Arabic atara, to slaughter for a sacrifice, right? Okay. The nochach, it literally is the opposite of, right? So he's keeping his kavanah aligned while he makes his prayer. So Adonai allowed himself to be convinced by pleading, and Rivka, Yitzchak's wife, became pregnant. Verse 22, but the sons within her kicked and shoved each other, and she said, if it is like this, then why am I alive? This word is really interesting. Where's that kicked and shoved? Here it is. Vayit rotzatzu. Okay. This is kind of a strange word. The root is actually rotz, right? Some say ratzatz. I don't think so. Ratzatz is like to cut off into pieces, right? Like Hashem does this to Leviathan in one of the Psalms. He chops him into pieces. But Rashi says it's rotz, right? Which is run. Like the idea they're both trying to run in different directions, right? And the fact that it's hit by L, it just causes some more chaos to it, like kicking all around. So hence push and shove. So she went to inquire of Adonai. Because she says, if so, then like this, why am I alive? So she had a hard pregnancy, right? They're kicking around in there, pushing on her kishki, all this stuff. And so look what it says for inquire. She went to lidrosh, right? This is the same word where we get drash from, right? What we're doing right now, we're having a drash, right? We're seeking, we're looking deeper, right? Or like we have the pardes, those of you who know the different levels of seeking in Torah. You've got the peshat, right? Your pardes, and you have the remez, and you have the drash. You're seeking even deeper, looking at the text. And then finally you have sod, right? The very secretive things of the Torah, the best kept secrets, the beautiful treasures. So lidrosh, to seek, to ask around like this is it's interesting that this is what's used. She's going with an open mind. She really wants to know what's happening. Is there some sin? Is there something she's doing? All right. Then I said to her, there are two nations in your belly, okay, and two peoples. Right? So already the fact that there's two peoples here, we understand that there's going to be a divergent. The promise that was given to Avraham by El Shaddai, that basically the messianic promise even, right? That it's all what's going to come out of his loins, that this is going to be one of them, and the other's not going to have it. And of course we know that Esau is the one who is not going to have it. So now for the birth time. The first one came out reddish all over, like a fur coat. So they called his name Esau. And after this, his brother came out. So, but regarding Esau, people have said, oh, well, is it like Harry or whatever? There's not a clear connection etymologically to what this name is, right? Some say maybe it's like Se'il, right? Maybe it got metaphysized or something, but Rashi, for some reason, connects it to Asa, saying that he came out like a full man, like make, saying that he came out like, I don't really understand what he means with that connection there. So if somebody else has a better connection of why they named him Esau because he was hairy like Admoni, Aderet, like a red cloak, basically, a red mantle. And even this is a weird word for reddish, this admoni. This isn't really the usual word we'd use for this. So there's some speculation about why this is used and what other hints are there. So he came out with his hand. Now, Yaakov was grasping at the heel of Esau. So he called his name Yaakov. Okay, so here's the word for heel. Ba'akev. See it? Okay. Means heel. And Yaakov is Jacob. Or more literally in English, something like he heel grabs, right? Or he's grabbing a heel. He's heel grabbing. Kind of like those little dogs that are called healers, right? They're healers. They're always at your heels. His name means nothing like deceiver or liar or cheat, as is a common anti-Semitic derivation, probably started by Esau himself, right? So I would imagine that in Esau's peoples, the Edomites, the later dialect, they would have a broken Hebrew. Probably it did mean something bad, like usurper or something like this. But that's not what it meant at the time, okay? This is an anti-Semitic concept. Think about it. What mother is going to hold her baby and say, "Oh, you little cheater, that'll be your name. I'm going to call you cheater. Oh, he's such a cheater. Oh, he's such a liar, aren't you?" Right? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, folks. That's not what his name means. It's so clear in the text when you look at the Hebrew. Ochezet ba'akev, Esav vayikashmo Yaakov. Look, you see, ayin, kuf, bait. Okay? There it is. Muffle again? Really? Oh, I wonder if it's an internet issue. Well, I am recording on a separate recorder. Hopefully that'll come through. I just hope you guys can hear right now. Yeah, keep me posted if it gets better or not. I'm really not doing much on my end. It might be this replacement cable I have for my headphones. The replacement is some cheap China replacement. The headphones are nice, they're like Bose, but the replacement, which has the microphone, but I've been using it every week. I don't know. Yeah, I think it might be an internet issue. All right. Yeah, it could be a wire thing. Oh, Adonai, ken yiratzon ki lo higeit tzarot. Achshav, tishlachoch hakodesh. Bevakasha, Adonai. Okay. So you can see, right, guys, the etymology, it's very clear. He grabbed the heel, so they called him healer. It's like that. That's what it is. There's no evil intent in his name. There's nothing bad about his name. And all these stories that, like, Jacob was a bad man until he had a salvation experience resting with the angel, and then he gets the new name, Yisrael, are just ludicrous. You need to challenge this. When you hear people talking like this, you need to challenge them. This is a misconception passed down probably even before the wicked Martin Luther, even before him. Maybe among the Catholic Church. I'm not sure what the Catholic Church teaches on this, but it's just not true. It's not the case. If it were true, then why would Psalms oftentimes refer to God as the Elohei Yaakov, the God of Jacob, right? It doesn't just say the God of Israel, it says the God of Jacob. He still uses that name. Also, our sages point out that you don't get a new name if you're wicked, okay? That in the Bible, when someone gets a name change, when they get a new name, it's because they are already righteous. You see? That's why in Revelations we're told that those of us who nikonti, those of us who succeed, those of us who finish the race successfully, nikonti, like related to Nike, believe it or not, will be given a white stone with a new name known only to God and us, right? You get the new name when you're righteous. You don't get the new name when you're a heathen, all right? So this idea that Jacob, the stealer, the cheat, the usurper, gets a new name, Israel, because he's such a great cheat and usurper. Give me a break. The text tells us he's an ish tam. He's a perfect man, a man without blemish. So we need to start erasing this aspect of the Goyish tradition that's in the body right away. It's Lashon Hara, it's Moti Shemra against our ancestor Yaakov. To say that he was a deceiver, that he was a liar, that he was a cheater, it's not true, so it's even worse than standard Lashon Hara. He wasn't. He's not, and we'll get into that a bit more as we go into the text. I think this is very important. It's really bad for people who are grafted in also to continue in this idea that Yaakov Avinu was some kind of cheat or liar or whatever, when the text itself says he was an ish tam. It's really bad because they are violating the fifth commandment, to kibed et avicha v'et imecha. Right? It's a violation. You should be honoring your ancestors, whether they're your genealogical ancestors who were righteous, right? Or you're grafted in, you're adopted. They're your adopted ancestors, right? How much more so the gratitude for them adopting you, right? So please, please take this to heart, everyone. Don't let it come from your lips that he was a cheat, that he was a liar, right? That he was a usurper, one of these things, because it was actually preordained that that the older will serve the younger. This is the prophecy that Rivka is given. All right, continue on. Yitzchak was 60 years old when he sired them. When the lads grew up, Esau became a man who knew how to hunt, a man in the field, but Yaakov was a perfect man who sat in tents. Okay, so here it is, Ishtam. Ishtam. Tam means perfect, complete, guiltless, without sin, upright, and honest. So don't get too cocky, brother Tom. Okay, don't get too cocky about this. Don't. That your name means perfect. So I choose to translate as perfect here because it's a valid. Bevakisha. Bevakisha. Your mom chose well. So I choose to translate as perfect here because it's a valid translation. It's a valid option, right? All right. And we're pushing back against some gentilic Christian traditions. Understand that I'm not saying it has to be perfect. It could just mean blameless, something like this, right? So, but nevertheless, this is the same adjective that's used in sacrifices. They need to be, they need to be in perfect condition, right? You give the best to Hashem, and this is indeed how Yaakov was. And then the text clarifies what's the evidence that he's an Ishtam? Yoshev Ohalim, sitting in tents, or who sat in tents. Okay, do you guys understand this? He's sitting in the tents. This is actually, this is code for studious. He studied. He was using his mind. He was wanting to be an imager of God. He's learning the traditions. Our sages teach us that he would sit at in the tent of Aver, in the school of Aver. He would study from Abraham, who's still alive, right? His grandfather Abraham, and so he's qualifying himself as an Ish Tam in this case. So here we gather the Torah's value of Bible study's importance, right? He was a studious man. Now, we get done this part. Yitzchak, however, loved Esau for his game in his mouth. By the way, Esau doesn't mean Esau, despite my pronunciation issues. So if I accidentally make it sound like Esau, we're not talking about Esau, okay? Esau's name means Yeshua. Esau is different, okay? Yeah. You're welcome. Esau. Oh, Esau says, by the way, was Aver a righteous man? Is that mentioned? Yes, Aver was. Yep, the father of the Hebrews. He was indeed a righteous man. I'm not sure if the Torah, as it's written, mentions that he was a tzaddik, but this is our tradition, that he was righteous. Righteous and studious, and he worshipped El Shaddai. Okay, so now what happened? So Yitzchak, however, Yitzchak loved Esau because of the game in his mouth, the venison, right? So some translate that the tzayid. Some of the sages say this means venison specifically, not just game, but deer. Which, oh man, deer is pretty delicious. I remember I was in London one time, and maybe you've seen this, and there was a street vendor selling venison burgers. I couldn't believe it. Because we have lots of deer in the States, right? And some people do raise deer, but it's considered kind of an exotic meat or whatever. And so I've never seen in America a venison burger, like a deer burger. And I said, "Is that deer?" And I discussed it for a while with the street vendor. Oh, it was delicious. I'm salivating thinking about it now. Anyway, Saeed, yes, deer is kosher. Okay, so Saeed, some of the scribes say this was actually was venison specifically, which makes sense. But Rivka loved Yaakov. It's very interesting that they kind of pit these two parents against each other and who they're loving, right? Like, why not both love both, right? And I can't remember who. I love to give credit, but one of the writers in the Mikot Gedolot, he clarifies, look, of course, Rivka loved both of her sons. When the text says that she loved Yaakov, it's just saying that she loved him more, like he's the favorite son from her eyes. And for Yitzchak, it was the other one, right? Verse Kaf Tet, that's 29. Vayazed Yaakov Nazid. So here you should see these words are related. Yaakov boiled then porridge or pottage or something that is boiled, is what that infers. Esau came in from the field and he was fainting. V'hu ayef, he's fainting, he's falling down, he can barely stand. There might be something deeper happening in the text here too, because this verb, this yazad, it can actually mean to be angry, right? To grow angry, and whatever results from that, like to act tempestuously, right? These sorts of things. Although in this case, in this form, we actually have it. It does mean to boil something, right? To cook it to boiling. So this brings us to spurning the birthright. Vayomer Esav El Yaakov Haliteni Namin Hadam Hadom Hazeh Ki Ayef Anochi. The ta'amim, they were kind of obfuscated by my boxes. I got confused for a second. Okay, so then Esau said to Yaakov, shove down my throat. That's what this means. Shove it down my throat. Shove down my throat now from the red. The red, this red. So, by the way he's talking, I love how the Bible does this. It really captures, like, the moment. It captures the speech patterns, right? Like I don't know if I mentioned last week's drash, but in the Aliyah Yomi I did, how Rivka, for example, she says instead of hazeh, she says halazeh, right? She has a slightly different dialect because she's from far away. It's interesting, right? And the Bible captures that. You don't see it when you read it in English. It's all glossed over, right? It's some of the little... A lot of people, they find the treasures to be some secret, meaning or some oh wow, the gematria or something in the text, and that's all great. But I myself just delight in seeing, when you're reading in the original, you see that the text bothered to capture their individual speech patterns. It captures weird words that people use. It captures, like when Lavan makes a deal with Yaakov, he uses an Aramaic word for the pile of the rocks, while Yaakov uses a Hebrew word. There's these little things that are in there that the text, it really shows that this is a genuine, preserved, faithfully preserved textual tradition. And it's really just amazing. And so we even see it here. The guy's about to pass out, right? And so he says, shove down my throat, right? One of the sages say he's so tired he couldn't feed himself. So that's why he says, shove down my throat. Shove it down my throat now from the red stuff. This red stuff, right? So it's like, if you read it in the Hebrew, he really is. He's kind of like, because I'm fainting, right? It's like urgent. He says a question. He says, Chazal say that Abraham knew the Torah. Is that a reference to mitzvot only? Are these all of the 613 mitzvot? Does that include irrelevant mitzvot from that time for Kohanim? What is the source of this teaching? Okay, so the source of the teaching is the Mishnah. I think it's chapter 4 in the Mishnah, where it talks about, it mentions that Abraham knew all of the Torah and he studied it and it was revealed to him, etc. But not all Chazal agree with this, Isa. Nachmanides disagrees. He even makes a case, and he gives certain examples that prove that Abraham he clearly did not know all of the mitzvot that had not been given him yet. So, yeah, it's a nice question. So there's some disagreement among Chazal. I mean, the Mishnah seems to indicate that he clearly did, right? But some think that was a later addition to the Mishnah. Because remember, the Mishnah, it was just memorized, right? It was oral. It was fully oral. It did not have the prevalence that the written text had, right? And so whatever you believe about Mishnah, whether you believe Mishnah was inspired, not inspired, or just something worth learning or whatever, it wasn't written down until later, after the Romans sacked Jerusalem and killed 600,000 of our people, right? So Esau says all of the Torah contains the story of Abraham and Yitzchak. Sure. I think I understand what you're saying there. You're saying that there's echoes of their actions throughout the whole Torah, like even in Leviticus, etc. Is that what you're trying to say? Maybe clarify for me there to make sure I'm following correctly. He says, I mean, it would be strange that he would know the history about him in the future. Yeah. Okay. Well, when the Mishnah says that he knows all the Torah, it's talking about the mitzvot. It's talking about the instruction, not the history. Yeah. So that should clear that up at least. It's saying that he knew, for example, you should do this and that, and you should, Shabbat has these rules and this sort of thing. Although Nachmanides even concedes that for sure he knew about Shabbat, right? And of course, because we see that Shabbat was blessed even before the giving of the Torah, right? We're told that by Baruch Hashem et Yom HaShevi'i, right? And by Kidshehu, right? Hashem, he therefore blessed the Sabbath day and he made it holy, right? And that's one of the things that we always say to people that are against Shabbat. This is an easier argument to make. You don't even have to make the whole Torah argument. You say, look, okay, maybe you don't want to keep Torah, that's okay. But Shabbat, this is God himself blessed it because he rests. Show me in the text where he unblessed it, where he unsanctified it, right? Because they'll say, oh, no, the Lord's day, the Lord rest, because the Lord rose on the eighth day, on Sunday, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. Where did he unbless Shabbat? Where did he unsanctify Shabbat, right? If anything, maybe there's something special about the day, whatever, that's a whole other argument, right? But he himself, the Messiah, rested on the Sabbath day. I mean, so you're kind of making the argument for me. Not you, Esau, just this mythical person who's standing here arguing with me. Okay, Esau says, I'm comfortable with him knowing some mitzvot like Shabbat, but he was also married to his sister, which is against the Torah. Yeah, exactly. And even, Chazal teach that even when, after we crossed through the Yam Suf, that many of the people were married to their aunties, which is also not allowed, right? This is one of the arguments that's used to say, look, the Torah's got to be real, because how would these people have accepted it? Right? Why would they accept this thing that's saying, look, you were there with me, you saw these things happening? They'd say, no, we weren't. Especially when you make it hard on them. You're saying, you can't marry your aunties from now on, right? Because a lot of them they were married to the aunties. The aunties were younger than them, right? So it's not that strange, but, Esau says, so perhaps some mitzvot were gradually revealed or even inferred. Could be, certain truths can be discovered, right? This sort of thing. Yeah, it's kind of like the parallel I make about Japan, where I talk about how they've got a lot of the mitzvot worked out, right, in their society. Yeah. I personally think that Abraham did not know all of the mitzvot yet, and they were not all incumbent upon him. But I'm on the fence on that, right? Because we do have, the sages are split on this, right? So it's a nice point. So Esau said to Yaakov, shove down my throat now some of this reddish stuff because I'm fainting. Therefore his name was called Edom. Edom is related to the word for red, right? So it's kind of like making fun of him for that. This is also where we get Adamah, meaning ground, with the idea of the clay-cursed ground being red in color. Some say it's also related to the shorter word, dam, blood. The common misconception is that Edom was so called because Esau was red himself. The biblical reason is the red lentils incident right here, right? So it's not happenstance that he was born that way and he gets called Edom. It's because he spurned the birthright, because he chose instead to have a bowl of beans, okay? And I want to point out something here, guys. I'm probably going to repeat it today because I want you to get this. A lot of people, when they read about the birthright, they think it's about wealth, right? They think it's about dynasty, right? They think it's about that kind of stuff. These are tertiary issues, maybe secondary issues. If you remember, when we went through Leviticus, we talked about how when Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Levitical code, and he explained, even in Exodus he explains that the Levites from now on are going to act in the place of the firstborn, right? And the firstborn, they get redeemed. They have to pay, the silver to the Levites so that they don't have to serve them and all this stuff. Well, before that, the firstborn son was the person in the family who brought offerings to Elohim. Okay? The firstborn son, he's the one who would make an altar. He's the one who would slaughter ritually. Of every family, the firstborn son, that was his right. He's the one who would come up to Makom, the ever-present God, and would commune with him and make the sacrifices. And that is what this text is really about today. This is what it's really about. Yaakov is testing Esau. He's seen that he doesn't really care to study. He doesn't really care to seek after Hashem. He sees that he's a hunter. A hunter is a vile profession. Okay, in the Tanakh, the entire Tanakh, there are only two hunters ever named: Nimrod and Esau. Okay, because hunting, it's not kosher, first of all. Okay, so if an animal is killed by hunting, you can't eat it. It's not allowed, right? Part of the reason is a cruelty issue. because the animal might suffer. You might not kill it right away, right? Maybe you shoot the arrow and it's tuchus and it runs and bleeds out eventually, right? It's suffering. It's not humane, right? God loves all the creatures. They have souls and spirits. He shouldn't be causing them suffering that is unnecessary. And the second is a kosher issue, right? If it doesn't bleed out properly and something happens with the meat, I don't remember all the science with it, like when they have too much of the hormone racing through their body and the meat is all tense, the muscles are tense. I think something happens with the blood that makes it much more difficult to kasher, rather than a ritual slaughter, right? Which is quicker, it's kinder, it's done properly, the blood can be controlled, the blood flow can be controlled. And so we have, even fishing is preferably done with nets, right? Because it's a better way to deal with the animals. So we have this kind of blight. And I know a lot of people, if any Southerners in the States are listening to this later, we're posting the drash up. I know there's going to be pushback from this. People are like, I used to connect to my pa. We'd go out hunting for 3 days, and that's how I do. He loved me. Look, time with your father is time with your father. Those hunting trips, it's mostly just time spent out in the wilderness together, right? Talking, visiting, and then maybe there's like 30 seconds where you shoot the animal, right? So really, it's just about time together. And so do not magnify something which is unholy and make it into a holy thing, okay? Nice time with your parent is a great thing for bonding, but hunting is not kosher. It's not allowed in the text, and the only examples of hunters we have are Nimrod, who the Midrash tells us cast Abraham into a fiery furnace. That's what a great guy he was. And then we've got, of course, Esau, who didn't care about the birthright. So what does it mean to not care about the birthright? Hillbillies, that's right, hillbillers. Again, I'm not making fun of Southerners. I myself am a Southerner. It's just, my parents are from New York, so I only slip into Southern accent when I'm talking to other Southerners, right? So it's kind of, I try to do the clean American speech, right? So I didn't mean for that to come off as making fun of Southerners, but hunting is very popular in the South. And so that's where, people don't like to hear that something that they love is wrong. They don't like to hear it. Hunting is wrong, folks. It's wrong. It's not condoned by the sages, and they have all kinds of negative character traits they attribute to hunting. Better instead now it's okay to use certain types of traps, like trapping, if you're trapping birds, for example. Not trapping terrestrial animals where you break their leg and stuff like that. It's just gross. But as far as like a cage that catches a bird and that kind of stuff is allowed. We see that, the snare, those sorts of things. So anyway, not to be on that too much, but people, they need to hear it. You need to hear there's some pushback on this. It's not a good thing. Okay, I think I lost my train of thought. Anyway, continuing on. So Yaakov said, sell me today your birthright. So Yaakov is testing Esau. He already knows he's a hunter. He already knows he's doing these things that are not so great. He already sees his midot morphing, his character traits, into the man he's going to be. And he tests him. When he asks him to sell him his birthright, friends, what he's asking him is, do you still want to be the representative of our family to worship Hashem? That's what he's asking. Do you still want to be the one? Only the firstborn, only the Bechor, only the firstborn son who has HaBechorah, the birthright, is the one who gets to make sacrifices for the family. Is that going to be you, or is it going to be me? Do you care about it? Do you care about your God enough and your time with him? Or would you prefer to be out having fun in the wilderness and doing your thing, right? That's what it's about. It's not about wealth. Look what happens later. Later, when Yaakov gets sent off to go find a wife with Lavan, what happens? He has to work for him. Yitzhak is rich. What happened? Yitzhak wasn't the kind of father to just pass out cash. Maybe he understood that it's best to keep your investment in the investment, and let that pay dividends over time, right? So keep it in the livestock, right? And the livestock grow, and then if you need to cash out someday, you can, right? Or maybe he knew there would be a corrupting influence. You never know. Some people are sensitive to certain things, right? But the point is, Yaakov left with like the shirt on his back, all right, to go get a wife, which is kind of odd. Go get a wife, but I'm not going to give you money for a dowry, right? So not what Yitzhak went through. Abraham sent 10 camels full of loot. He paid the dowry, jewelry, and all these goodies and special foods from Israel. And the camel is already something that's very special. At that time in ancient Near Eastern cultures, there's not much writing about camels because they were exotic back then. Now they're everywhere, right? But they were exotic. Back then the beast of burden was the donkey, the mule, etc. So it's a different story though for Yaakov and Esau. Neither one of them are sent off with a bunch of money, right? So it's kind of interesting. So the birthright is not about the money. Later on, in Parshiot coming up in the future, when Esau and Yaakov meet again, Esau is richer than Yaakov. So clearly, the issue of the birthright is not all about inheritance. That's a secondary or tertiary issue. It's about who gets to represent the family at the altar, and who wants to do it. And have you ever known somebody who can't do a fast? Right? They can't fast one day even. I'm not talking the full Jewish no water fast, just no food. Have you ever met somebody, they just can't do it? They can't separate their physical needs from service to the Most High. This is what this is about. This is Esau's character traits. He was someone like that. He was someone who was unable to separate his physical desires. And when he weighed it in the balance, I'm super hungry, I'm going to faint, with I'm going to be the one to meet with Makom, with the ever-present one, right? With El Elyon, God on high. That's going to be me who meets with El Shaddai, God who provides, God Almighty, Pantokrator, etc., all this stuff. Nope, give me the beans, pour them down my mouth. Right, pour them down my mouth. Where's the faith? Where's the faith? And then such a swindler, if anyone is a cheat and a liar, it's Esau, because later he tries to stick it to Yaakov, our ancestor. Esau tries to dishonor the deal. He still tries to get the birthright. He's fine with it. What a rasha this guy was. Okay, continue on. Esau answered him. Right, that's right, the camel, the Ferrari of the time, Esau says. So Esau answered him, look now, I'm about to die. For what purpose is the birthright to me? Oh, whew. Deep mistake. Prevalent in the Christian tradition is treating Yaakov, who is called Tam, perfect, guiltless, honest, as a cheat, while conveniently overlooking this passage where Esau spurns the birthright, treating it like garbage. Then Yaakov said, swear to me this day. And he swore to him and sold his birthright to Yaakov. So according to Midrash Tanchuma, the boys were 15 years old when this happened. Also Targum Yonatan, commenting on translating verse 29, agrees with the Midrash here. And you can also find this in the Talmud, Tractate Baba Batra, page 16, the back side of the page. Then Yaakov gave bread to Esau and boiled lentils, and he ate and drank and arose and left. So it is that Esau, Vayivez Esau et habechora. So Esau despised. Baza means to despise. He hated it, despised the birthright. This is not commentary, people. You have to shake up that Christian tradition you have about that stuff. It's not commentary. It's the text. It's the Bible itself. It tells us what kind of person Esau was. He despised the birthright. You don't get to interpret this yourself. The text self-interprets. It's right there. It's right there. Vayivez. This is a very strong word. This is the noun that comes from this is booze. Booze, which means contempt, right? In the Psalms it says, for too long we've had too much contempt, right? That some of those who are in captivity are saying to Hashem, like, bring us back to the land, etc., etc., etc. Booze, contempt, comes from vayivaz, to despise. He held in contempt the birthright. He didn't care for it at all, which sounds like he didn't. It's like one of these kids that when it's time to go to a religious function, the kids are all annoyed and ticked off, sighing, rolling the eyes. They don't want to go. They don't want to go to the shul, right? Instead, they'd rather play their video games or watch TV or whatever it is. Do something fun, right? They're not eager to go to the house of the Lord. Instead, it's a pain in the tuchus for them. And that's what it was for Esau. That's why he despised the birthright. It was a burden on him to have to do the offerings, to have to do the sacrifices. And if it's true what the Midrash says he's 15, this makes a lot of sense. Teenagers want to play, right? Esau just wants to have fun. Okay. Let's talk about 100-fold blessings now. Shift gears a little bit. In our camel Ferraris. And let's see what the text says. Vayomer Avimelech Mazot Asita Lanu. Okay, so this is now we're Yeah, this is the whole story of Avimelech, and when he notices that Yitzhak was messing around with his wife, right? And he says, "Kim at shachav achad ha'am et ishtcha vehevete aleinu asham." Pardon me. Is it a little thing? This is kind of a weird word. This kim at. It's actually, we see from Mishlei. You can see in the Proverbs. It's used. It means like it could have happened, right? Or it almost happened. It nearly was that achad ha'am, one of the people, shachav, slept at ishtcha with your wife, which is kind of funny. It makes you ask about their culture. Really? Like, was he just going to trip on her and sleep with her by accident? Or, so, the heveta aleinu, and you would have brought upon us asham, guilt. And I've talked with you guys about this before, that this is also another example of the Bible really understanding the ancient cultures. It's telling a true story, first of all, right? In the ancient Near East, all the cultures of the ancient Near East, we get this from Akkadian, they believed in the chatul ribu, right? The great sin. And the great sin, the worst sin of all, was adultery, sleeping with another man's woman, right? If she belonged to somebody else and you slept with her, that was chatul ribu. In many of the cultures, it was a death penalty, but they believed it would bring curses and all these sorts of things from the gods, right? The great difference between their cultures and ours is that this translates into Israelite culture as, instead of chatul ribu, it becomes pesha rav, right? The great sin, the great pesha, the great crime. But the great crime is not adultery. Although that's a horrible crime, it is a pesha. The pesha rav is idolatry. It's spiritual adultery, right? Going after other gods. Only in the Israelite mindset was worse than the chatul ribu that we had in the ancient world. Vaitzav Avimelech et kol ha'am. So Avimelech commanded all the people, lemor, saying, Hanogeya ba'ish hazeh v'ishto mot yumat. Anyone who touches against this man, naga, it's touch, but it's usually like in a negative sense. We get words for blights and this sort of things from this as well. So anybody who kind of like strikes him, you could interpret that, does a negative action against this man or against his woman, mot yumat, she'll be executed. She'll definitely be put to death. Verse 12, Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi vayimsa b'shana hahi mea she'arim. Then Yitzchak sowed seed in that land. And matzah in Hebrew means to find, right? But in Ugaritic, the same word means like to overtake, right? To reach, right? So probably it's more like the Ugaritic sense. And he reached Bashana Hahu in that year, Mea Sha'arim. This is kind of a weird phrase. Mea means 100. Sha'arim, it looks on the surface like it's gates, right? It's a homograph. It's written the same way as the word for gates, right? So I think there's something deeper spiritually happening here, right? That there's kind of an echo of something about the Mea Sha'arim that's happening. But we also have this other word, Sha'ar, which is like a portion, right? So 100-fold is one way that we translate that. The first word, Me'ah, simple 100. Some postulate it to be a weight of grain. Others interpret it as fold, like 100x. The Targum Onkelos in Aramaic expands these two words into Aramaic as Al-Chad Me'ah Vid Sha'aruchi, 100 times more than they had calculated it. So that's kind of interesting. It's according to Jastrauss in lexicon. The Septuagint interprets it Ekatostu Yisan Krithain, bear 100-fold barley. So it's very specific that the sha'ar actually has to do with a barley measurement. Now, this is the name of a religious community in Israel today. We still have this place, Me'ah Sha'arim. It's interesting. Well, it's named after that, not that it's the exact same place where this occurred. Janine comments that Yaakov stayed home and studied the Torah. That's like social distancing in our present time. But this also has its downside. We're not able to congregate face to face. We miss the assemblage. Yes, but there's also some positive side to it. I'm always concerned when we meet, and of course I do miss seeing all of you, especially when sharing, to see the reactions, to be able to respond to the reactions, to look in your eyes, all this kind of stuff. It's much better that way, right? But one thing that's always in my mind, I'm always like, some people are going really far. Sometimes it's really hard in a jeepney to get there. Sometimes, there's transactions being made, right? People are tempted to walk into 7-Eleven and buy some stuff. These things are happening. Like in our desire to be Mikah Kodesh, a sacred assembly, are we at times violating Shabbat even perhaps? I'm reserving judgment on that. I'm just saying it's always in my head. It's always in my head. Like, there were a number of years ago when I used to teach somewhere else, I finally had to stop teaching there because, the first reason, I won't get into the other reason, but on Shabbat, I had to reduce my teachings there, right? Because sometimes I'd spend the night. But to go out on Shabbat, I lived in a subdivision that was 2 kilometers away from the main road, and sometimes it's very hard to get a trike, and I'd be carrying my saxophone and walking on Shabbat, and it's hot and sweaty, and then got to wait for a taxi. There's no Uber or anything back then, right? No Grab. And so I got a little bit convicted, like, this is not Shabbistic. I felt like I'm violating the Shabbat to go teach people about Shabbat. You see, like, and so I kind of pulled back then a bit, right? I was like, okay, this is not. So I'm not saying this is everyone's situation, but this is my concern. Someone writes me in private. Okay, that's fine. I won't reveal that private comment. Yeah. So it's a good comment, Janine. And of course, I'm even thinking that maybe when the lockdown's over, maybe what we do is we still meet, but we consider meeting, for Havdalah or something, right? So we can have our live service in the daytime, or twice a week we actually meet, twice a month, or whatever. Let's brainstorm about it. Maybe someone will have a nice idea. So we can on the one hand, keep the holiness of Shabbat, while on the other hand, we can still have our Mikvah Kodesh, right? So, all right, continuing here. Vayva'achehu Adonai, or because, I think it's probably because, or this is probably Vav emphaticum, like an exclamation point. Adonai had definitely blessed him, is what it's saying there. Now, I want to show you something in the gematria of Yaakov's name. Esau says, what about him? He's over in England. Yeah, you got to travel to us every Shabbat. Esau. Again, Esau, not Esau. All right, so in a way, Yaakov's name is even prophetical, right? So the Yod signifies the future, all right? And then the Ayin is 70, the Kuf is 100, and the Meit is 2. So you add that up, that's 172. These are the exact number of letters in the Aseret HaBarot, in the Ten Commandments. So that his name, even his name, had a prophetical quality to it, that there would one day be these 10 Commandments, and they would have this exact number of letters as his name. When? Yod, in the future. Esau says he'll wait until teleporting is developed. Do I think that teleporting would violate Shabbat? No, you teleport before Shabbat and then stay the night. How about that? And then go home after Havdalah. Then it's no problem. Crying won't change things. Verse 34. Kishmo Esau et divrei aviv v'yitzak gedola umara ad me'od. Okay. When Esau heard the words of his father, then he cried out a great and bitter cry. Oh! Very much so. Literally it says, until exceedingly. That's what the Hebrew says. Vayomer laviv, baracheni gamani avihi. So he said to his father, bless me also I, my father. That's what it says in the Hebrew. It really seems like when you take this and the red lentil incident, I'm kind of starting to think that Esau was a bit of an oath. He can't even speak right. Bless me also I, Daddy. Ugga. So I'm not sure, but maybe all that time in the field, not talking with people, I don't know. Maybe he didn't get a lot of practice talking. Maybe when Jacob grabbed him on the. Okay, I'll stop there. Fine. Continuing on, 35. Vayomer ba achicha b'milma. So this is Yitzchak talking. So he said, your brother ba, like Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. He came. Your brother, he came b'milma. This is kind of a tricky thing to translate in context here. On the surface, it looks like it says with deceit. right? Now Rashi comments actually in the Mikro Toldot. He writes, "B'mirma" means b'chochma, shrewdly, right? Shrewdly. He came shrewdly. He came more intelligently than you. Vayikach birchatecha, and he took your blessing. Verse 36. Vayomer hachi kara shemo Yaakov v'ya'akaveni zeh v'ami mayim et bechorati lakach v'hinei ata lakach birchati. Okay, so here's the useful idiot spouting off complaints. So he said, this is a question mark, this ha here, like question mark, that, is it not so that he called his name Jacob? Now it's interesting to me, who's the he here? It sounds to me like he's accusing God even, that he called his name Jacob, right? Because of the prophecy and all this sort of stuff. Now it could be Yitzhak, but who's the he? He's complaining to his father. So he should say, Karata Shemo, if it's his father who's responsible. So who's the he? It's not his mother, because that would be Kara'ah. Who's the he here? It seems to me it's Hashem, that he's complaining about Hashem, that he calls his name Yaakov, healer, V'akaveni zeh v'amayim, and he's healed me, he's grabbed my heel these 2 times. Now, I want to push my point that I talked to you before about his name not meaning deceiver, not meaning cheater, usurper, any of this anti-Semitic, Martin Lutherian nonsense. Okay? Look at this Hebrew text right here. Yaakov. Okay? One who grabs the heel, right? Or he will grab the heel, or imperfect, he continuously grabs heels. And he grabbed my heel these 2 times. This word pa'amayim, the ending is dual, so it means 2 of them, right? Like yadayim means 2 hands, pa'amayim means 2 times. But the word pa'am, it means more than a time. Pa'am is a stride. It's a footstep, you see? So even Esau, who might have corrupted the meaning of the word Yaakov later on, and so it might have come back into Hebrew even with some negative meaning later on after the Edomites had their own dialect, even here he's not doing that. He's saying, look, it makes sense that his name's called healer because he's grabbed me by the heels these 2 strides. You see? These 2 strides. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh yeah, thanks, Isa. Isa's pointing out that in Onkelos, even in Onkelos, in Targum Onkelos, this B'mirma, it's translated into Aramaic as Chochma, as with Chochma. Right? That's Chochma, it's shrewdness, intelligentness. Intelligently he grabbed it, that's up here. And here we see that he's doing the playoff of words about feet. It's all about feet. He called his name heel grabber, and he's grabbed my heel these 2 strides. You understand? Pa'amayim, it doesn't mean 2 times, but it also means 2 strides. Like a stride, have you ever counted your strides? You take it. Some people, they know their exact stride, and they can even use it for measuring like the length of a room or something, right? And they'll count the strides. 1, 2, 3. A stride is like 1 single step. So you see the play on words that's happening in the Hebrew that it's totally lost in English? How many of your translations show this, right? He's called heel grabber because he's grabbed my heels, these 2 strides. You see, it makes sense, his complaint. And here's what Esau's talking about in Onkelos. The chachmani. You see the chacham, the root there, guys? Similar meaning in Aramaic. He's outsmarted me. Nice, Esau. It's nice. You got there first. Good job. Good job. Et bechorati, my birthright. Lakach. Now, lakach, gang, you might be thinking, I know this word, it means take. Sometimes it means take. I want to show you what else lakach means. Check this out. Chizkuni comments, Et bechorati lakach, he had purchased my birthright. With these words, he tripped himself up by revealing that Yaakov was legally entitled to this blessing. Lakach means to purchase. It means to purchase. It can mean take, but it can mean purchase. And we have a tradition that Yaakov Avinu actually gave him money in addition to the lentils, right? That he also gave him money, but that the text just doesn't go all into that, right? Look what else. I'll give you more evidence that lakach means purchase, to buy. In Ugaritic, even though we like to look to Aramaic, because Aramaic is close to Hebrew, even closer is Ugaritic. In Ugaritic, the word, this is lakach, it's the same. Lakach means to buy. This is according to the Gordon Ugaritic textbook, which is like the textbook on Ugaritic. It means to buy. So Chizkuni, even though he didn't know Ugaritic even existed, he still understood this nuance of lakach, to buy, right? So he's saying that he trips himself up here. He even admits to Isaac, he admits that he bought my birthright. And now look if you, now knowing that you can have these different meanings for lakach, look at it now. So he's correctly called healer because he heel grabbed me these 2 strides. And now et bechorati, this is special emphasis. This is an exclamation point, or it should be in bold in your Bibles because it's out of order. It should be lakach et bechorati. But when you say first et bechorati lakach, it means he's like excited about it. My birthright he bought, and now, look now, he took my blessing. And this is typical Hebrew parallelism where you'll use a word one way in one clause and another way in the next. It's really nice. It's really nice. He bought my birthright, and now he's collected on it. I signed the deed to the house, and now he took the house. He followed through with it. I thought he's such a nice guy, he's not going to follow through, but he did because he saw I'm worthless trash. He saw I'm a piece of garbage. He doesn't care about the Bechorah. That I booze, it's contemptible to me. Vayivaz Esa et ha-Bechorah. Esa there despised the birthright. And now Yaakov has collected, and Esau just admitted it to his father. Then he finally comes to his senses. He realizes he's doomed. He says, have you not held back for me a bracha, a blessing for me? 37. Vayan Yitzchak, vayomer le'Esau. So this is Anna. If you don't see it, there's a hey at the end that falls away. Then Yitzchak answered, and he said to Esau, Hen, Gevir, Samtiv. Okay, so look, behold, a Gevir I have set him lach to you. A Gevir is like a strong man, right? Like a mighty man. Like this is where we see like a victor. It's like when Yeshua talks about if you want to rob the house, you first have to overpower the strong man, right? The guy who's in control of the whole house. It's basically what Yitzchak's saying. He's saying, look, Yaakov, he's the Gevir of the whole house. I set him as a Gevir over you. You're part of what he's controlling. That Kol Echav and all of his brothers, Natati lo, I've set over him as Avadim, servants. The Dagan, the Tirosh, Tzemachtiv, and even the grain and the wine, the new wines, Samachtiv, I have leaned on him. This is an interesting word he's using here. Samach. This is the same word that we use when we're talking about ordination. Smecha. Smecha comes from this word. It's a leaning of the hands. The Bibles that say that the Levites would, or that the Kohanim, that they would rest their hand or touch their hand on the sacrifice, that's not correct. They lean on it. They would lean on it. They put force on it. So I have really I've leaned on him for these things. Like it's been transferred already. Ulecha, and for you, Eifel ma say b'ni, what then should I do, my son? He's got everything already. He's your boss. Ishtam. Okay, so of course we do know that. You've read the parsha, you know what happens. He gets a bit of blessing. So now I want to circle back around. You've seen how Rasha Esau is, even trying to get the birthright blessing, even though he knows he sold it. He even says that his brother Lakach, he bought it from me, and now he's collected the blessing. So now let's look at how righteous Yaakov is. And this is something where the ta'amim are very important. Okay, come here, come back. Okay. So I came to his father and said, my father. Now, remember what happens. Rivka commands him. She says, I command you, my son, to do this. She uses the word command. Metzavah, I command you. I command you to do as I say, okay? So you have to first understand the mindset of Yaakov. He's been commanded by his mother to basically collect on what he already purchased. All right? That's what the command is. She's commanded him to not get screwed over. Okay? So, this is interesting. The ta'amim, the accent marks in the Hebrew, and I'll show you a more detailed figure in a second. When his father says to him, he came to his father and said, my father, he said, here am I. He says, who are you, my son? Okay, who are you? Who are you? I wanted to show a Schwarzenegger picture a clip there, but I don't know how to make that work on GoToMeeting. Who are you? Hineni miata beni. Who are you, my son? In verse 19. Okay, it's very interesting. It says, Vayomer Yaakov el aviv anochi Esav bechorecha. Okay, so check that out. If you look at the Masoretic tradition, you see all these little points here that they're showing me how to sing the text, and they tell us grammatical information. They tell us when there's a pause. They tell us if they're connected to the word that follows or the word after, if they stand alone. They're basically like commas and apostrophes and semicolons and periods and colons in English grammar, all right? Now, it's interesting to me that the Goyish traditions, they like our tradition on the vowels, the nikudot. You see this, patach, kametz, shwa, chirik, all these things they like, the vowels that tell you what the text means. But in the exact same text that has those traditions, the exact same tradition, the Masorah, that tells us these accent marks, that they don't like, that they don't care about, usually. They don't look to that in their interpretation. And of course, it makes it much easier to do the Motzi Shem Ra crime against Yaakov, to make him look like a thief and usurper. Instead, look how righteous he is. Look what happens. This is how he answers if you look at the Ta'amim. He answers his father. His father says, who are you? And he says, it is I. Semicolon. Esau is your firstborn. You see? Did you catch that? That's the proper tradition, the proper translation. If you look at the grammatical markers, the ta'amim, in the text, the same grammatical markers that are from the same tradition that give us the vowels. Okay? So it's very convenient for the Goyim to just take the vowels and then ignore the ta'amim, when the ta'amim have value too. I have done as you've spoken to me. Okay? What does he mean here? Asiti kasher dibarta elai. Is he saying, I've gone and hunted? No, what he means is, I've kept your religious instructions in my life. I've learned to be the man that you trained me to be. I've grown in the way I've studied the tents of Aver and of your father Abraham, right? That's what he's referring to. Again, true. Ding, 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 true. Kumna, arise, please. Shiva, and be seated. The idea is like at the table or something. V'chala, and eat. Meet Seidi, from my game. Ba'avor tevarachani nafshecha. So that your soul might bless me. Okay? There's no lie happening here even. It's interesting. He's trying very difficultly, even though his mother set him up to this, right? And commanded him, mitzvah, gave him a mitzvah, right? To do this thing, he's still being very, very careful. He's trying not to use words directly that are deceptive. You see what a tzaddik this is? So this position that I'm using here in my translation based on the cantillation marks, it's also found in Midrash Tanchuma, Toldot 10.3, and a little bit hinted at in Rashi's commentary. So this is not just Yirmeyah being Meshugana. I want to map it out for you a little bit more in case you don't believe me. Okay. This is from a program that I have that maps out how the ta'amim break down a certain text, right? So you can put a verse in, and it shows you the relationship, right? So when they're disjunctive, they're separated, then they come together. So this means the Revi'i, this one, they call it Revi'i, I call it Revi'i, that's how I was taught. It governs these two subsections, right? Okay, so check it out. Then Yaakov said unto his father, it is I. Next break, Esau is your firstborn. Okay, we come back up here, and now the next section. I have done how you have spoken to me. Come back up, all the way over here now. And the Sof Pasuk goes to the Atnach, which is the clause breaker, all the way down. Arise now and be seated and eat from my game, so that your soul, your life force really, that's the part that likes the game, right? That likes eating the venison, may bless me. You see? And of course, the game changer's up here where he says, it is I. You see the break? The Revi'i is I. Then we come down to the next section. That means there's a disjunctive accent telling us that those two things are separate from each other in thought. Esau is your firstborn. Okay? So even this tool, this programmatic tool is breaking it down the way that I'm sharing it with you. I'm not just freeballing here. freewheeling. It's actually not freewheeling. It's actually like this. Okay. Taking versus buying. Okay, this is just more on what I was telling you about this here. You can see my birthright he bought, and now he's collected my birthright indeed. Hebrew parallelism will do this sometimes. It will actually even use the same word with a different sense of the word. He bought and he's collected on it. There it is. Boom. Just reiterating more of the same. If you like to do screenshots, maybe it's interesting to you there. I give the full reference to the Ugaritic interpretation as well. Summary. Being first. Thus the last ones will be first, and the first, the last ones. As Yeshua was going up to Yerushalayim, he took the 12 Talmidim aside by themselves and said to them, as they went on their way, "We are now going up to Yerushalayim, where the Son of Man will be handed over to the head Kohanim and Torah teachers. They will sentence him to death." Matityahu 20, verse 16 through 18. "At that time you will be arrested and handed over to be punished and put to death, and all peoples will hate you because of me. At that time many will be trapped into betraying and hating each other. Many false prophets will appear and fool many people, and many people's love will grow cold because of increased distance from Torah. But whoever holds out to the end will be delivered, and this good news about the kingdom will be announced throughout the whole world as a witness to all the goyim. It is then that the end will come." Matityahu 24, 9 through 14. And you actually see this played out with the brothers, with Esau, a little bit, with Esau and Yaakov. Look what happens. The one brother doesn't care about ministering to Hashem. He rathers the things of the world, right? And then when it's time to get the reward, the blessings, the blessing he wants, the bracha he wants the loot. He wants the press, so to speak. He wants the power. He wants the family name. He just doesn't want the responsibility, right? That's what this is about here, this notion of of people increasing the distance from Torah. In our narrative today, Yaakov Avinu, he represents the Torah. He represents all that is right and good. He represents Anshe Tamim, men of blamelessness, who Yoshavim Ve'oholim, who dwell in tents, who study. Those of you who spend your time studying and loving the Word, you know what I'm talking about. That sweetness of it that's there. That comes from the Torah study, that comes from getting closer and closer to Hashem. But there's always this temptation, the calling of the world, to be like Esau. And this even pollutes Christian theology with these notions that it's okay to slander our ancestor Jacob. Right? Even though Esau's the perfect example of how not to behave. Right? We have all the midrashes about biting the neck of Jacob and all this kind of stuff, and the dots that are over the text, when it says by Nashku, by Yashku, Oto, that he kissed him, really he bit him, it should be, these are all just because there's an understanding from our sages and the traditions that Esau's kind of a negative archetype. He's one that invariably ends up going bad, right? Even the women he marries are descendants from Canaanites, granted to Ishmael, but all of the stuff he does not honor his father. He does not honor our traditions. He doesn't honor El Shaddai. He doesn't honor the God who he knew, and he threw away the Bechorah in the trash. Israel as a whole, all of you as a whole, are called Bechor Elohim. As he speaks to Pharaoh, to the Egyptians, he says, "Because you slay Bechori, my firstborn, I will slay your firstborn." With the understanding that we all have this privilege, we all have this right of the firstborn, and you have to live up to it. Don't trade it away for something. Don't let the world chisel away at what we have, the closeness that we can have to our God, the oneness we can have as a community, the chesed that we can enjoy and also share to one another. That is the clan loyalty, right? Protecting each other in prayers and in community and all these sorts of things, right? Staying close even while the world is going crazy. Refusing to go the way of Esau. Refusing to be a hunter, to just do whatever's enjoyable, to skip out on times. Even if look, I know sometimes you don't want to meet. Sometimes you don't want to study. Sometimes I don't feel like it too, right? And all I can share is there's a nice story I've shared before about a father and a son, and it's time to put on tefillin. And the son says to his father, he says, look, Dad, I really don't feel like doing tefillin right now. Okay? And the father says, son, let's just do the tefillin, let's lay tefillin, and perhaps the feeling will come during or after. You see? When a Christian tradition person reads the story today, Jacob looks like a real jerk when they read him in their translation without the Tamim and all this stuff. He kind of looks like a jerk, right? And they tend to empathize with Esau. Why? Why? Because the text says, Vayivtcha, because he he cried. Because he cried. Have any of you ever been tricked by a person just because they're crying? Right? You ever been in a relationship where the person's doing you wrong, but they cried, so oh my gosh, they cried. You know, it must be true, they cried. This is the emotional response that traditional Christianity is involved in. Oftentimes, not always, but often, it's about emotions. Yeah, Esau points out, like leftists do, exactly. When Obama cried, oh, he cried. What a mensch. What a tzaddik. Right? Esau points out, Mark 24:12 says, and the love of many will go cold. It doesn't say in any translation that I have because of the distance from Torah. Is that inferred from the Greek somehow? Yeah, I will admit this is a CJB. I copied from CJB. I need to look at the text and see there. I'm not sure why he got this to be distance from Torah. That's a good question, Esau. We should check that out to make sure that that's legit. Usually Stern is pretty solid in his reasons. I'm going to guess that it probably, the Greek word that's being used there goes back to something in the Septuagint that gives him this notion, right? Or maybe it's a word that has to do about living a legal life, right? Like living a lawful life like this. But that's a good thing to investigate. Thanks for calling me out on that. We should see. Yeah, and so, so what happens is the same way that Christianity condemns Jacob and grieves with Esau, they follow his testimony. They follow his testimony instead of what the Bible says, right? The text says that Esau despised his birthright. He hated it. He hated the duty that it put on his shoulders. He just wanted to have fun. He just wants to go swimming and hunting and walking around and seeing the blue sky, and life is great, and that's it. He didn't want, studying isn't easy. It's not easy to sit in a tent all day long when it's beautiful outside. You ever been at school on a sunny day and the birds are chirping right outside the window? What's easier, to go have fun, to skip school, to play hooky, we say in the States, to skip school, or to buckle down, to just put the tefillin on, to just have musar, have good instruction, discipline. You lack discipline. Good discipline. Have discipline to follow through. This is one of the primary differences between Jewish culture and the Goyish cultures that have brought us various denominations of Christianity. Is it emotion that's the most important thing, or is it logical thought and reason? And again, I know that there's some mix, right? There's some mix. There's a lot of great Christian theologians who are great debaters. They've got logic down, and all this stuff. So I'm not saying it's so overly simplified. But if any of you who have visited churches, surely you've seen how emotion prevails, right? It's often an emotional experience to go to church, right? And the preacher who can cry, or or when someone gives their testimony, they're crying, wow, what a great testimony that was. Why? Because they cried? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Instead, how about better that we keep from sin, that we keep the Torah, that we bucker down, that we have the musar in our lives, that we want that discipline, that we hold ourselves accountable, that it's not enough to be like Esau. It's not enough to just go out and have fun and to say, you know what, maybe I'll skip this Shabbat, next time. I don't really feel like it. I know I should study today, but, I really want to watch Friends. I don't know, whatever's popular now. I really want to watch this thing. I need to do my Facebook. I need whatever. All this. Break free, people. Come on. Break free. Free yourselves. Don't be like Esau. Don't be from that philosophy. And it has invaded the church. This sloughing off of responsibilities. just leaving it to a few select few to pull the weight of everybody else. It's not supposed to be this way. It's not supposed to, there's a group that is very interesting historically called the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists were these Europeans who, they had a belief that every believer in the Kahal, in the congregation, if moved, invested in having biblical knowledge, could share their message with the congregation. They could speak it out, right? I'm not saying it's totally correct, but I sympathize with that. I like that they could contribute to the ministry, so to speak, right? From their knowledge, from what they felt was important. I like that. It's unfortunate that Martin Luther had many of them drowned to death, but I like it, when you think about it. Instead of having just like a handful of people who are doing all the stuff in the ministry, imagine if everybody is doing stuff in the ministry. Imagine how we could get our message out there. I mean, I know COVID and stuff, but I'm just saying in the future, and I'm not trying to condemn anybody. I'm just saying, imagine if we're all like Yaakov, right? We're moving forward, we're studying. And you might be thinking, oh, wait, but I'll never know as much as so-and-so. I'll never have this and that. So what? You're still going to have something worthy of teaching. When I was a shaliach in Russia, a missionary in Russia, I was a young man. I took a leave of absence from the university, and I remember, like, at first I thought, who am I to do this, right? What do I know? I'm just 20 years old, I don't know anything to be doing this. But then I saw how thirsty the Russians were. They had been under communism and now they were free. Communism is so wicked. Don't ever let anybody leave you that way. The idea that there is no God, teaching there's no God, and the atheism and all this, it's just a wicked system, okay? But at the same time, nobody knew anything. So you had all these thirsty new believers, people just came to accept Hashem, and even knowing a little bit is more than nothing, you see? So even if you feel that you don't know enough, you still know more than other people who need it, who need what you have. If you would like to, if it's in your heart to help spread Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew, if you just know how to read, teach somebody the alphabet. That's huge. It'll help them to break through, to have access to other resources, those sorts of things. So imagine if our whole Kahal does this, if we're all we're growing in this way of adding to the ministry, contributing to our ministry, spreading the net wider, right? Helping to influence more and more people for righteousness, for the kingdom's sake. Nellie says, some of my close Christian friends, when I shared Torah to them, they got cold, especially when the topic was feast, kosher, and Shabbat. Yeah, they're Esau, Nellie. It's because they're Esau. Not Esau, Esau. Sorry, Esau. Esau says he's heading his name right now. Esau. Maybe I'll just pronounce it like modern Hebrew. Esav. Just say the V. So it's so clearly not Esau. But yeah, that is the spirit of Esau. This laziness, I don't want it. Really, because if you think about it, how hard is it really to do Shabbat and the feasts? How hard is it to do those things? It's really so hard? Really? Like, how hard is it to even eat kosher? Once you get used to it, the rules are super simple. You can count them on your fingers, each rule, for how to eat kosher. The basics, right? What's allowed, what's not allowed. And it's so funny, like, I was having a debate with somebody maybe a week or two ago. Well, it was kind of a brawl. There were some Hebrew roots guys and some Christian guys, and then I was in there. I think I was the only oh no, there's another. There were two Messianics, and there's this debate going on, and it's like it's in a forum, right, back and forth, and we're arguing about stuff. It's about the dietary laws today, right? Do they still matter? And one of the guys, one of the strong Christian guys, he basically we tried. I saw the conversation got steered in such a way that, well, what about, say that you do believe that Torah doesn't apply to you anymore, but what about the Jerusalem Council when they say that you shouldn't eat blood, right, and you shouldn't eat food sacrificed to idols, and you shouldn't, So I asked him. I said, so just curiously, forget Torah for a second. Are you okay with going into a Hindu restaurant and having yourself some Indian food, knowing that in the back it might have been offered to Ganush or whoever, And he's like, yeah, and he goes on, he pulls out the verse about how idolatry, it's only in the mind of the weaker brother, blah, 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 blah. It's like, but he ignored the verse that comes later where Paul says, I don't want you to have communion with demons. And so it just amazed me. The Esav mental gymnastics that people will go through to be lazy. And so I came back, other people, they discussed it for a while, and then I came back a couple days later, and I saw what he wrote, and I replied, I said, so tell me this. Let's say you've got your WWJD bracelet on. What would Jesus do? Okay? And you go to the mall, and there's a Taco Bell, and there's a Temple of Doom cafe. Are you really going to go into the Temple of Doom cafe? They got their idols, and they got blood there. Really, that's what, I'm referring to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. For those of you who don't realize, they drink a big cup of blood and stuff. You're thinking, yeah, Jesus would go in there. Yeah, sure. Come on. How deep do you have to have your head in the sand? And so what Nellie's mentioning, their spirit growing cold, is because they're lazy. They're spiritually lazy. They don't want to even investigate Shabbat. Because you can keep Torah out of it. You can say, look, I'm not trying to put Torah on you, blah, blah, blah. But come on, the Shabbat, that's even before Torah. God blessed it. He made it holy, right? That's the holy day. How can you get out of that? Why not just try it? Try it and see if it sticks. There's really just this whole people, they don't want to live up. And you know why? That's why they're not grafted in. That's why they're not fully grafted in. That when the apostolic writings talk about the weaker brother, it's not talking about the Torah keepers. I tell you that. That's not who the weaker brother is. Janine says, by Esavites covet Yaakov's blessings. They do covet. That's true. That's true. And I've seen it. I've seen it in many people's lives. Brothers and sisters who were born outside and they've been grafted in and they've been doing Torah for many, many years. And I see the blessings. I see what's happening in their lives, both physical, even, not that this should be why we do it, but you can see the fruit of their labor. They really, their families are better, their lives are better, and yeah, even their finances are oftentimes better, right? It's Hashem is making people the first, not the last. By being his firstborn, there's certain promises that are with that, and it is to be the first, not the last. And you guys know, I get so proud of Israel, and Jews, and 24% of Nobel Prize winners, and the third largest country on the NASDAQ with tech companies, USA, China, then Israel, and all these things. But still, the blessings are very real, they're very tangible because God is true. And so when people, they try to, the danger, what happens, Rabotai, is navigating the writings of Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, right? He's not a bad person, and Shaul is a tzaddik, okay? So don't get me wrong. Some people, they go the wrong way, and I reject those from the apostolic writings. No, they just don't understand him. He's so misunderstood. He's hard to understand, but it takes a lot of time to study one of the letters from Rav Shaul, because we have to get into all of the stuff. We got to get into the culture, who he's responding to, what was the situation there, how are those Greek words used? Is it an ironic letter that he's writing, or is it some other templated Greek style of letter? Because he's super educated, right? And on that vein, I want to share with you a verse that I wish you all would memorize. Actually, it's 2 verses. So that we can remain first, okay? So we don't get deceived, to be pulled away from Torah. This is from the book of 2 Peter, 2 Kepha, chapter 3, verses 16 through 17, okay? And I was going to put my own translation here, but I decided, nope, I didn't mark it. This is ESV. I decided to do ESV so that you don't think that I'm massaging the text or something, okay? This is a very popular worldwide translation. Okay, so Peter, Kepha, is warning us about reading Paul and coming to certain conclusions, okay? Let's see what those conclusions are. So Peter's warning some people in this letter. He says, as he, I put the shawl, Paul here, so you know who he's talking about. If you go back to the previous verse, you can tell it's Paul, does in all of his letters when he speaks in them of these matters. There are some things in them that are hard to understand, which the ignorant and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do the other scriptures. You, therefore, that's beloved, knowing this beforehand, take care that you are not carried away with the error of lawless people and lose your own stability. That's not my translation, folks. This is ESV, okay? A very popular, modern, Goyish translation of the scriptures, ESV. He's warning people, when you read Paul, be careful that you don't become like the lawless people. Can you imagine? Look, it's so clear. So, if you have limited Bible time to study, I actually recommend not diving into Paul until you've covered the other bases. Make sure you've got the words of Messiah down, right? Make sure you've got the Torah down. Make sure you've got Psalms in your heart. Make sure you're in the prophets and all this stuff. And then when you're armed and ready and you got the time to dig into Paul, then by all means, Go see what he has to say. But in the meantime, be careful, Rabotai. Be careful. If you see anything in Paul, and this is a good verse. I hope you guys will memorize these verses. Verse 3, chapter 3, verse 16 through 17. Second Kepha, 2 Peter. Okay? Yeah, he's writing to some brothers who have been confused by Paul. And he admits Paul is hard to understand. I'm answering Esau's question here. He's hard to understand. That's he's saying, look, don't be carried away. Yeah, I'm not sure. I could say they're grafted in, though. I don't know if they were originally Gentiles or if they were grafted in and had become Jews already of this audience. I'm not sure, Esau. That's good to dig deeper and see what that is. But there's no more Jew or Gentile today. The dividing wall partition has been torn down. And what I mean by that, what the text means by that, is that ideally the Gentiles are supposed to join us, right? They're supposed to join Israel. Otherwise, how could Paul ever refer to the Kehillah as Israel, right? Really, he's calling Gentiles Israel? Give me a break. Doesn't make sense, right? Instead, they graft in. They join us. They become adopted sons and daughters. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, Esau. Yeah, it requires deeper digging. But the point of the matter remains that these two verses here are a warning. It's a warning from someone who walked on water with the Messiah, okay? And he warns us, when you study Paul, don't be carried away with the error of lawless people. Don't become lawless. That's all I've got for today. If you guys have any comments or questions, looks like we met the goal, Baruch Hashem, under 1 hour, 45 minutes. We're at 1:39 now. Any comments or questions about the topic at hand? Tet says in all of his letters, Jews and Gentiles, she would think. Comments, questions, are we good? Should I pray and just let you go? I'll give 30 seconds to see if there's any more comments. Good turnout today. Thanks everybody for being here. I hope you like the new focus. It'd be nice to get some feedback if it's good, not going into the psalm and you know. Okay. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Todah Lecha. Todah Lecha ki natat lanu et Toratecha v'gam et Mashiachenu bincha Yeshua HaMashiach. Thank you, Father, you've given us the Torah, and you've given us also your Son. Thank you for our ancestor Yaakov, that he was an Ish Tam, that he was a blameless man, a man who you protected and held, and that it's through his lineage that you had already prophesied to his mother that the older should serve the younger. Thank you for not letting your son come into the body of an offspring from the wicked Esau. We're so grateful, Lord, that Jacob later gets the title Israel, and even sometimes you refer to us as Yeshurun, affectionately. Help every individual, please, Lord, who's listening to this drash today, find new and creative ways to seek you out, to attach themselves to your word, to study the holy tongue, to get closer to you every day, and to not be part of the worldly system, and to not be sucked into the goesha, the Gentile religious modes of laziness and Christmas trees and Easter bunnies and all of this nonsense, all of this shav, this vanity, this worthless things. Help us to be strong in your word and to have supernatural memories, that we might remember what we study and what we learn and internalize it. And may it be your will that day by day you write your Torah on our minds. V'kol hadavarim ha'ele anachnu nevarecha b'shem v'gam b'zchut Yeshua HaMashiach. L'olanu v'lecha yihyeh kol hakavod. Okay, that's amen to that. And Esau comments, he says, some Christians use the passage from Peter to show that he is testifying to Paul's writings, putting them on the same level of the Holy Scriptures as being also inspired by the Ruach. What do you think about that? I think that Peter definitely gives deference to Paul's writings, and he does say, he uses the words graphe in the Greek, right? The writings, right? Which can also mean scriptures, right? It seems, although you could argue on that word graphe, if he's just saying the writings of Paul, or is he treating them as quote-unquote scriptures, right? Because you can choose how to translate that word. I think it's fair to say that he's saying, look, these letters from Paul, they really are divinely inspired, right? They're God-breathed, that sort of stuff. I think he does put them on a level. But you remember, in Jewish understanding, there's a hierarchy to the kedusha of Scripture, right? Torah comes first, right, and then comes the Nach, right? The prophets and the writings are next, right? And so in similar vein, in the apostolic writings, I certainly would not put Paul's letters on the same level of the words of Messiah, who is the Torah, right? The Torah for the apostolic writings are the Basorot, right? The gospel accounts. Isa says, Grafe, Ketuvim, part of Tanakh. Yeah, I think like that. Yes, the scriptures, the writings, yeah. It really just means the writings, but it's used to mean scriptures. Yeah, good question, Isa. Very nice. Any other comments or questions, guys? Well, I'm pleased that the Hebrew class is going through the Aliyot. Like I said, it really was in the spirit of, for you guys, that I started doing the Aliyahs of the day. All 7 Aliyot are there for this last Torah portion, right? So if any of you feel like, if you're disappointed that we're bringing it down from 2.5 hours to 1 hour 45 minutes now, look, there's lots of content up there from the week on the YouTube channel. You know, there's maybe 4.5, 5 hours worth of teaching. If you want to get deeper in the text, go through word by word, you can do that. And for the Hebrew class, don't be discouraged. If we don't get the 10, we don't get the 10. We can try for tomorrow. Try to stir the people up, but I'm glad that you're working through the Aliyah Yomi, the daily Aliyahs that I'm putting up there. It's because it's reminding you of the grammar, and you're getting some new grammar information, and you're also learning like little children do, right? Just being in the text through immersion. Yeah, and by the way, guys, it's no matter where you are with your Hebrew. If you just know the alphabet, the rest of you can prosper from these classes. You can benefit from them rather, and it might seem overwhelming at first, but you can just kind of dive in, and at least you're going through the text. The text being read in and of itself is already a bracha. It's already a blessing. So yeah, Bessie, let's try for tomorrow. Try to rally the troops. If we get 10, we'll do it. If not, just keep doing the Aliyot Yomi. Aliyah Yomi, okay? Any other comments or questions? I'm about to let you guys go. We got time maybe for one more. Ted says reading it helps a lot. Good. Janine says, Todah Rabbi Shavuot Tov, everyone. Yeah, there you go. You might end up making your own grammar rules, Bessie. Nellie says, I always heard to some Christians, I live as what spirit leads me. What is your comment, Rabbi, regarding? Okay, it's a good question. So Nellie asks about the Goyish Christians, the ones who say, I just do as the Spirit leads, right? You're talking about, I think she's talking about in contrast to Torah keeping, right? My answer to that would be, does the Spirit lead the lawless? You know, is it the Spirit or is it something else leading them? You know, what's really leading them? Yeah, what spirit exactly? You know, I think Brother Tony has shared before on the Kundalini spirit in India that has people praying in tongues and stuff like that, right? And so I'm not saying tongues aren't real, but in that case, what's the source, right? So which spirit is leading them? And it looks like a sign or whatever. So yeah, I mean, of course, look, God can talk to Bilam, right? You know, it's like, so he can talk to who he wants to. He can lead someone if he wants to, but this whole I'm led by the Spirit, therefore I can continue in sin. Look, Rav Shul, we're talking about Paul. He says, I would not have known what sin was if not for the Torah. The Torah teaches me what sin is. So if someone who doesn't study the Torah, who wants to walk in sin, what's he say about that? Should we then continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous to say I'm led by the Spirit, but I'm polluting the temple of God with unclean foods. I'm sacrificing pork on the altar of God. It's a dangerous way of thinking. And it's not their fault. Don't be angry at them. It's not their fault. They've been hypnotized by generations of theological backflipping that's happened. Guys, he says, I think if the Spirit disregarding Torah would deceive us. Yeah, that's right. I agree with that. Okay, good talk. Everybody have a great week. Shavuot Tov. And please check out the YouTube channel. Maybe subscribe, do a like. We're hoping to impact more people, yeah? So maybe we can get it out there and have more of an effect and bless more people. Shavuot Tov, Louis. Shavuot Tov. You're very welcome, Bessie. God bless everybody. You're welcome, Tom. Have a great week.